Hello, I'm Robert Visitation and welcome back to my channel. Today, we're going to work on the hook. And more importantly, the three most common mistakes made by people throwing that hook. Now, number one is the distance. The distance that this hook is being thrown at. Now, initially, the hook is made for a good tight punch, okay? We see a lot of people swinging out, swinging wild, swinging for the fences like this, right? And that's not to say that you haven't ever seen anybody take off and they do throw a really wide punch and catch somebody, maybe even stop the fight and knock them out. But this hook is intended to be a tight hook. Tight hook. Bam, right there, okay? So, number one is the distance. Number two is the foot placement on these. The foot placement. When we are throwing, when we're outside and we're throwing our jabs and our crosses, we're staying out at a good distance, right? A good distance to catch the punch on the end of that punch, the end of that snap, so we can get the most amount of power out of those particular punches. When we know we're going to throw the 1-2 hook or that 3, we need to make sure that we're stepping in on those to be able to throw that in the correct manner with the ultimate power that this hook was designed for, okay? So when you're standing outside throwing your 1s and 2s, you're staying out here, bam, and you're staying out at a good range. When you know you've already set him up for this and you already know that you're gonna step in with that 1-2, boom, and then throw that third hook, then we need to make sure that we're stepping in close to it, almost as if you're stepping on their foot, almost their front foot, and then come in and turn, okay? So to get the range, step, turn, chamber, and then let that hook roll. Now, which brings me to 2.5, I guess. The movement with your foot. I'm going to step in already. I'm going to be hook distance right now. So I'm going to turn and I'm going to throw this hook, boom, right here. Now, my foot is not flat on the ground when I'm throwing these. We'll have an insert here to where you see my foot going up, pivoting on my toe, and my heel pivoting with it, okay? That's how you're going to get the movement and the rotation correctly to get the most amount of power out of that punch. Now, with that said, 1 and 2, we're going to work with the hips, okay? So we're stepping in, we planted, we threw our 1-2, now we're going to drop and lock, we're going to throw that hook. It's all on the hips now. Okay, so now let's talk about the upper half of our body. The upper half of our body is just as important. Now, when we're outside and we're sharpshooting and we're shooting those 1s and 2s down the center, we're always trying to keep our hands home, right? Our hands, if our hand goes out, away from it, comes back home. It doesn't punch, go down, and then come back home. You might get caught in the meantime. So we're throwing our 1. We've got this side, this shoulder shrugged over here, and this is help protecting this side of my face. I've got my hands home on this side over here to throw my right hand. So as I come across and throw that cross, boom, right? I'm throwing that cross, these 2 knuckles, this shoulder shrugged as well, this hand's up here home, protecting myself. Now, when I'm in this position, most of my weight is on this front leg because I'm leaning forward. Most of my weight is on this front leg. So as this hand, my right hand returns back to my head, back home rather, this hand's going to drop and lock, and then you're taking some of that weight off that front foot. As you take the weight off that front foot, that is when you twist, you have that twisting motion, right? Shrug this shoulder over here on this side, this hand's back home. You're dropping and locking this one to this side of your body like we talked about earlier, and use those spin on the toe and then lock your arm to that hip. So you have that good solid power coming around out of that hook, okay? So in review, we need to make sure that we're typically throwing a tight hook. You know, hooks aren't made to do this right here, this crazy stuff like that you see, right? And again, not saying that you haven't seen somebody hit with them, hit well, and maybe even knocked out with it, but this punch, the hook is intended to be an in-tight, close, powerful punch. So make sure we have our distance down, okay? Number two, that foot placement. When we're sharp shooting from out here, we're keeping a little bit of a distance. When we know we want to throw that 1, 2, 3 and engage that hook, we want to almost step on their toe. 1, 2, drop and lock. This hand comes back home, and engage that left hook or right hook, whichever one you're throwing at that time. Number three actually, is we're going to pivot that foot. Like we showed earlier, we're going to pivot that foot. And then we're also, number three, we're also going to lock our arms to our hips. If my hip, I'm not going to throw a punch, a hook like this with all arm, or on this side with all arm. I lock it to my hip. If my hip doesn't move, my arm doesn't move. Does that make sense? If my hip doesn't move, my arm doesn't move. So those again will be a 1, 2, pop. Right there. Again, a 1, 2, pop, right there. Good, solid, tight hooks. So if you have any questions, drop them down in the comments below. If you have a suggestion that you'd like to see on this channel, go ahead and drop it down below. I'll certainly get back with you. We will be having, or we'll be shooting Scarface Montalongo leg kicks later this week. We'll also be shooting Jennifer Salau Chantavong with her knees, whether fighting or in self-defense. We have had a request, yes, to work combinations on pads, and we will probably have Jose and Jennifer both working on pads, and we'll show a lot of combinations that we use here at VFit House of Champions, and we use those in our fights as well. So good combination pad work. We'll be working probably next week, and but later this week we'll be shooting Montalongo on leg kicks, Jennifer on knees. So guys, if you find this channel helpful, I'd really appreciate you punching that subscribe button, kicking that like button there for me. That would help me continue to bring you good, relevant content for your boxing, your Muay Thai, or your kickboxing journey. Until next time.